Our next speaker, our last speaker for the day, is Mr. Lindsay Reed, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Minbos Resources Limited, a mining engineer with 30 years' experience in exploration, development, operations, and corporate finance. Lindsay has worked in minerals, sand, copper, tin operations, obtaining a mine manager's certificate. After completing an MBA, he worked as a resource analyst in the Australian equity markets. Since then, he has started and managed a number of resource companies with projects in a range of commodities in Australia, Africa, and Asia. Shall we please welcome Mr. Lindsay Reed to the stage?
Thank you very much for the lovely introduction. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for staying so long to listen to me. Michael, feel free to take a photo of me anytime you like. There's nothing you can do to make me look better. So, it's great to be back here live. Last year we streamed from Angola, and it's good to be here with fellow colleagues and friends from the down under part of the world. Our friends on the other side of the world are messing things up on every front that you can see, you know, on security, on economy, on energy, on pretty much everything they touch at the moment. We're in the lucky hemisphere. And in the next generation, that hemisphere is going to become luckier and luckier. And I'm not sure whether you know or whether you believe, but Africa will have a profound impact on the world, both as a continent and a college of nations in the next generation, which I think most people do not expect. So it's my pleasure to be here today and meet with you and talk with you and introduce the small impact that we're going to have in our chosen field of endeavour in Angola. There's a disclaimer there, which I'll ask you to memorise, and we'll have a test on that during the cocktails later on. That was a joke, you can laugh, yeah. This is the challenge that's facing us as a world. This chart is the gas price coming in through Amsterdam in Holland, the Dutch gas price. And contrary to a lot of belief, most of that increase occurred before the war in Ukraine. This was set up from pre-COVID and probably dates back to 5 or 10 years. And it's very, very important to understand what this means for us. That gas price, and there are other cheaper reference prices in Europe, but this price has gone up more than 50 times. In our chosen commodity, it means that the input costs are now 4 times the cost of what the price is. And you can see CRU tweeting recently, only a couple of days ago, saying half of the ammonia plants in Europe have shut down because of this. More recent commentary yesterday saying that's closer to 70% of the plants that have shut down. And this is a mismanagement or a misunderstanding of how energy transition can work or should be working. Gas is a replacement and direct substitute for coal and nuclear, and if you look at the European statistics, gas consumption for energy generation in July was 25% higher this year than last year, despite all the challenges they face trying to access gas. So we've got a situation here where gas is being deployed to replace coal and in some places nuclear, and we forget that gas is 85% of the source of our nitrogen fertilizer all over the world, which grows the food all over the world for the world. This impacts us. We're looking at a couple of commodities as we start, a phosphate project and an ammonia project. Phosphate is also impacted because most of the phosphate in the world is exported as monoammonium phosphate or diammonium phosphate. And as the name would suggest, they need ammonia. If you want ammonia, then you need gas. This really feeds back into the food situation everywhere and is a big problem for the world going forward. I think in the next decade it'll take us a long, long time to resolve. Today I want to talk about our invitation to participate in 2 endowments in Angola. The first is a phosphate project, the second is a green ammonia project, and some of the opportunities that sit in front of us. We have the opportunity to work on blending and distribution and lime. We even have a partner that's interested in lithium iron phosphate with our 2 endowments. But the future opportunity that I'll talk to today is soil organic carbon. But first I want to talk about the phosphate and the nitrogen. That's 2 out of the 3 primary nutrients, NPK. And they're the 2 that are most required in Angola. Our phosphate project, we pushed the button on that early last year to construct it before we'd even commenced some of the studies. There was 2 reasons for that. The project was very, very important. It looked very robust on the numbers that we already had, and we knew that the flow sheet could be readily adaptable to all of the opportunities, all the permutations that could be thrown up at us. That was just as well because at the beginning of this year and late last year, the permutations went off the scale and we had to repurpose that flow sheet before we'd even installed that flow sheet. That's all of the major equipment for the flow sheet is fabricated and ready to be shipped. We're pushing ahead on our DFS to try and finish our DFS before we finish building it. The change in strategy, and we'll talk about that and how we did it and why, was due to the fact that some of our major inputs increased by 400% and 500%. That changed the way that our customers would perceive the product and their ability to utilise the product and make a profit and make a return on themselves. So we had to change it. The reason that we weren't too fast, and don't get too hung up by the detail on this slide, what I want to show you is we can roll out this flow sheet in 3 different ways. We can make an enhanced phosphate rock product where we add MAP and we add molasses, or we can make a beneficiated phosphate fertiliser with just phosphate rock and a couple of secret herbs and spices that we have, or we can add some acid and make super phosphate. What you'll notice from that, and what I want you to take away from that, regardless of which way we go, the key elements of the flow sheet are the same and they're in the same order. We just need to do 1 or 2 things with screens and conveyors to be able to flip from one campaign to another campaign. So we have a lot of capacity to modify, to adjust for the markets and also to adjust for the emerging and changing and evolving market in Angola as it comes along. The reason why we're doing phosphate is there's a market of 3 million smallholder farmers on 5 million hectares, which make up 90% of the market in Angola, and they are contiguous and homogenous and a very easy demographic to attack as a fertiliser customer. Most importantly, we need to get in place somebody to coordinate that, and we've got an arrangement with the IFDC and the International Fertiliser Development Centre, and as their name suggests, they develop fertiliser, but they also develop fertiliser markets and link the components of the markets to ensure that this rolls out and it works. The IFDC's just submitted a memorandum of understanding to the Ministry of Agriculture and the government in Angola for an Angolan farm and fertiliser productivity program. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, but I think what real message you want to take home is the tonnages that they're talking about in the next 10 years pretty much accommodate everything that we can produce on our scope in our project on the phosphate side, and the field trials that we've been doing in the last 3 or 4 years demonstrate that this product will work in the context that the IFDC wants to roll it out. Angola already has a lot of things in place. It already has land, it has people, it has rain, it has a lot of infrastructure in terms of roads and ports. It has farmers, it has a market, it imports a lot of its food. It already has food aggregators. What it's really missing is the 2 things that IFDC and Minbos bring. We're the missing links in this circle. IFDC will bring the training and the knowledge about the soils and the recommendations on how to best manage the soils for the context that they have, and Minbos will bring the primary nutrient that's necessary for everything. Phosphate is the first thing you need to feed a plant. Nitrogen is the second. Luckily in Angola, there is reasonable amounts of potassium in the soil, which will suffice for a few years. But the key is that this can be unlocked in the IFDC, and our project are keys to unlocking that. Once we've finished with the nitrogen, the phosphate, then of course you want the nitrogen. Angola has the best green nitrogen project opportunity in the whole world. Angola has 1,000 megawatts of hydroelectric power that doesn't utilise, and we've been able to secure some of that for the purpose of building a nitrogen fertilizer plant. It'll be a zero carbon opportunity, and the reasons for doing it are simple. Gas is getting more expensive. 85% of the world's nitrogen is made from gas. Hydropower has never really competed with gas when gas was cheap. But in Europe, we've seen it's gone from $1 to $100. At $1, we couldn't compete. At $4, we can compete. At $100, it's not even a question. Even in the US, it's $9, $10. So this is starting to become a very compelling project, aside from its zero carbon credentials. And that's the macro tailwind that's in behind it. Angola is lucky that it already has this power installed and ready to go, and it's cheap and it's available. We've secured a concession for 200 megawatts, which will do about 300,000 to 400,000 tonnes of ammonia, depending on which electrolysers we use, and we can talk about that over cocktails if you like. But most importantly, which a lot of people don't understand, it's been done before. It was done in Zimbabwe in 1972. Sable Chemicals on Kariba Dam built a plant almost exactly the size of this. And a lot of people here, some of you look old enough to remember, but you had the green revolution in Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe became the breadbasket of Africa. This happened around the development of this plant. All of a sudden, Zimbabwe had nitrogen. Before, it didn't have nitrogen. If you look at the yields in its crops in 1970 versus the yields in its crops in 1974, some of the yields went up 10 times for having this nitrogen. Angola has exactly the same opportunity in front of it. The opportunity's gone from Zimbabwe now because there's more demands for the power, but Angola is not connected to the network, so there's not the demands for the power. So they can take their own resource, turn it into a fertiliser for their own farms and farm for their own food. So it's a wonderful opportunity. It's easily done. It's been done before. It was done before gas-based nitrogen. Making it locally is important. You can make it in Nigeria, bring it across in a boat, bring it through the port, pay the freight forwarding, do the transportation, take it out past my gate. It's $200 to drive past the gate of the project that we'll be building in Angola. So that building these projects locally, and we will see more and more of these green ammonia projects that are built locally for local markets, local product for local markets to capture this transportation advantage, which will offset some of the capital scale advantages. The last thing I'd like to talk about is soil health, soil carbon. This is a big opportunity for us. Soil carbon, soil organic carbon is soil health. If you put carbon in the soil, you need it there. If you want carbon to grow, carbon elements in carbon plants, you need carbon in the soil. You can't have carbon coming out the top without carbon in below. Increasing your soil carbon helps your soil health. But be cautious. Not every soil in the world can increase soil carbon. Some soils already have more carbon than you know what to do with. Other soils are already being managed optimally and they've got as much carbon as they can take. Soils like Western Australia, where there's no clay and not a lot of rain, it's almost impossible to increase the soil carbon in a lot of our soils that are prone to increasing, and I'll skip forward because we've only got a minute left. Soils that can be increased in the soil carbon are ones with high clay, high rainfall, and probably have had a history of nutrient depletion. Angola's had a history of 40 to 50 years of nutrient depletion, first because of a civil war and then an oil boom, which just meant that the knowledge and the experience of farming properly was just depleted and the soils have been mined. Farming is mining. You take out the nutrients and the minerals from the soils and you ship it out on the truck to whoever eats it. If you don't put it back, it's gone forever. You have to put it back. If you don't put it back, you lose that system and that balance and that soil carbon. The area in the red there is the greater wheat area. That's where the 5 million hectares and 3 million farmers are. We can add 10 to 20 tonnes per hectare of carbon into that soil. It's perfectly fit for what we want to do and results in somewhere between 50 to 100 million tonnes of carbon sequestered, and even the nature-based carbon price is $10 a tonne. So there's a massive opportunity for Angola to use what the world wants to fund what it needs: food security, jobs, economic growth, and be good for the planet at the same time. The benefit of soil carbon: it's a buffer for your nutrients, it's a buffer for your water. As you have to deal with more variability, you have more nutrients in your soil, you have more water in your soil to save up for the not rainy day. I think we've got a wonderful project. I think we're in a wonderful country. I think we're in a wonderful continent. I thank you for your time, and I'd ask you to follow our future, because I think our future is the future of the world. Thank you.